My name is John. I have always considered myself an ordinary person. I live in a small town in Ohio. I work at the local police station. My life was peaceful until this story happened. It all started one fall evening when we received a missing person report. A local farmer, Samuel, reported his wife, Elizabeth, missing. She went to the store and did not return. Samuel was in despair. He said that was not like her at all. She always came home on time. We started an investigation but found no leads. A few days later, another local resident disappeared. It was a young guy named Jason. His parents were also in despair. I began to suspect that there was a maniac in our town, but we had no evidence, only missing people and worried relatives. One day we received a call from a woman named Margaret. She said she found a strange package outside her house. We immediately left for the place. There was something terrible in the package. Body parts cut into pieces. We understood that these were the remains of missing people. Panic gripped the town. People were afraid to go out. Children did not go to school. Businesses closed early. We worked day and night trying to find at least some clue. But the maniac was cunning. He did not leave any traces. One evening, as I was walking home, I noticed a strange figure in the dark. It was a hooded man standing outside my house. I moved closer, and he quickly disappeared into the darkness. I was scared, but I knew I had to act. The next day, I told my colleagues about my meeting. We started tracking this man. It turned out that he lives on the outskirts of the town, in an old abandoned house. We decided to search. We arrived at his house at dawn. The whole team was tense. Each of us understood that this might be our only chance. We entered the house and found something that stunned us. The walls were covered with photographs of missing people, their personal belongings scattered everywhere. We found a maniac in the basement. He was sitting in the corner smiling at us. We detained him without any resistance. His name was Richard. He confessed to all the crimes, described in detail how he lured his victims and what he did to them. Richard was sentenced to life imprisonment. The town gradually recovered from the horror, but I will never forget this incident. Every time I close my eyes, I see Richard's face and his creepy smile. After Richard's arrest, the town slowly returned to normal life, but peace did not come to me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something remained unknown, something hidden in the darkness. I started having nightmares. I saw the faces of Richard, his victims, heard their screams. I could not sleep, constantly woke up in a cold sweat. I realized that I had to learn more about this maniac to understand why he did all this. I started researching the archives. I found old newspapers, records about the disappearance of people in other cities. It turned out that Richard was no stranger to this business. He has been engaged in his terrible deeds for many years, moving from place to place. I went to several towns where Richard had lived before, talked with local police officers, relatives of missing people. They all told the same thing. People were disappearing and no one could find any traces. In one of the towns, I found something interesting. One of the police officers said he saw Richard with another man. They looked like good friends. This was the first clue. Richard may not have acted alone. I got home and started looking for information about this friend, Richard. It turned out that his name was Michael. He lived not far from our town, but moved shortly before Richard was arrested. I decided to talk to him. I went to the town where Michael lived. I found his address and knocked on the door. He opened it and was surprised to see me. I introduced myself and said I wanted to talk about Richard. Michael invited me inside. Michael said that he had known Richard since school. They were best friends, but then their paths diverged. Michael could not believe that his friend had become a maniac. He said he last saw him a few months ago, and Richard looked very strange. During the conversation, I noticed that Michael was acting nervous. He was constantly looking around, as if he was afraid that he was being watched. I understood that he was hiding something. Maybe he knew more than he was letting on. I decided to follow Michael. For several days, I watched his house, tracked his routes. It turned out that he goes to the forest on the outskirts of the city every evening. It seemed very suspicious. One evening, I decided to follow him. I hid in the bushes and watched Michael go deep into the forest. He stopped near an old abandoned house. I couldn't believe my eyes. What is he doing there? I decided to come closer. He carefully approached the house and looked through the window. What I saw was horrifying. In the middle of the room, there were photos of missing people. and on the table lay instruments for torture. Michael was no less terrible than Richard. I immediately returned to the station and told about everything I saw. We gathered a group and went to the house in the forest. Michael tried to run away, but we detained him. He confessed to all the crimes and told that it was he who taught Richard. After the arrest of Michael, the town began to live a peaceful life again. I was relieved to know that we had caught a real monster, but the memories of those events will always remain with me. Every time I look into the darkness, I see the faces of Michael and Richard. The town slowly recovered from the second arrest, but even though we thought it was over, there was still a sense of unease in the air. I continued to work, but every time the phone rang, I waited for more terrible news. A few months after Michael's arrest, people started disappearing again. At first, we thought it was a coincidence. But when 3 more people disappeared, we realized that something was wrong here. All the missing people had one thing in common. They were all close friends of Richard and Michael. I began to feel that someone was watching me. Every time I left the house, I felt someone's eyes on me. It was unbearable, but I couldn't let myself stop. I knew I had to find out the truth. We began to investigate the disappearances and found another interesting detail. All the disappeared had recently communicated with one woman named Sarah. She was a close friend of Michael. Perhaps she was involved in these terrible events. We began to follow Sarah. She worked as a nurse in a local hospital and lived alone. We did not notice anything suspicious in her behavior, but my intuition told me that she was hiding something. I decided to talk to her personally. Visited the hospital in the guise of a patient. Sarah seemed very friendly and sympathetic. We talked about her work, and I casually started a conversation about Michael. Her reaction was immediate. She got nervous and changed the subject. I started looking for information about Sarah. It turned out that she repeatedly changed her place of work, and every time after her departure, people began to disappear in the towns. It couldn't be a simple coincidence. One evening, we received a call from an anonymous person. The man said he saw Sarah near an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. We immediately went there. Inside the warehouse, we found evidence that confirmed her involvement in the disappearances, clothes and personal belongings of the missing people. We immediately arrested Sarah. She tried to run away, but we stopped her. During interrogation, she admitted that she was an accomplice of Michael and Richard. Together, they planned and carried out these terrible crimes. Sarah also revealed that they had another accomplice, but she did not know his name. This information shocked us. A third accomplice. Who could he be? We started looking for new leads. Perhaps this person was still at large and continued his terrible deeds. One day I received a strange note. It was written, "You will never find me." The note was unsigned, but I knew it was from a third accomplice. This was his challenge. He played with us. We started checking all possible options, interviewed people who may have known Michael, Richard, and Sarah, but nobody knew anything. It was a real dead end. I felt like we were starting from scratch again. One day I received a call from an old acquaintance, a detective from another city. He said that they also started having people disappear, and all the disappearances were very similar to ours. He asked me to come and help in the investigation. I went to another city. There I was met by a detective named George. He told me about a series of disappearances that began several months ago. We decided to join forces and look for this third accomplice together. During our investigation, we found another important detail. All the missing people were patients of the same hospital. We started checking the medical staff and found a suspicious doctor named Henry. He worked at the hospital for a short time, but his past was shrouded in mystery. We began to follow Henry. He looked like an ordinary person, but our intuition told us that he was hiding something. One evening, we saw him going to the forest. It was too much like Michael's behavior. We followed him. Henry walked into an old abandoned house similar to the one we found at Michael's. Inside the house, we found even more evidence that confirmed his involvement in the disappearances. We decided to detain Henry. He tried to resist, but we were able to stop him. During interrogation, he admitted that he was the third accomplice of Richard and Michael. Together, they planned and carried out their heinous crimes. Henry received a life sentence. The town began to return to normal life again, but I knew that these events would always stay with me. Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of those we lost and those we caught. After this terrible period, I decided to change my life, move to another city where no one knew about my past experience. I started a new job, a new life, but the memories of those events will always remain with me. My new life was much calmer. I started working as a private investigator in a small town in Illinois. Things were going well, and I felt that I had finally found peace. But sometimes the past reminded of itself. One day, a woman named Emily approached me. She said that her sister went missing a few days ago. The police found no leads and decided to contact me. This case seemed familiar to me. I started an investigation into the disappearance of Emily's sister, checked the places where she was last seen, interviewed witnesses. It turned out that Emily's missing sister worked as a nurse at a local hospital. It brought back memories of past events. I started checking the medical staff of the hospital and found some suspicious people. One of the doctors, named Daniel, looked particularly suspicious. He had a dark past and had already changed jobs several times. I decided to follow him. Daniel led a rather closed way of life. He rarely left the house and hardly communicated with anyone. One evening, I saw him go to an old abandoned farm outside the city. It reminded me of events I had experienced before. I followed him and saw him enter an abandoned farm. Inside the farmhouse, I found a room that looked like Michael and Richard's basement. There were pictures of missing people on the walls, and instruments of torture were lying on the table. I collected the evidence and returned to the police station. Together with the police, we went to the farm and detained Daniel. He confessed to all the crimes and said that he was part of a large network of maniacs who operated throughout the country. This information was shocking. We began an investigation and found that there was a network of maniacs operating throughout the country who helped each other avoid justice. Daniel said that they had their own rules and code and that their actions were carefully planned. We have started hunting for members of this network. It turned out that there were more of them than we could imagine. Each of them had their own role and operated in a certain region. It was a real challenge for us. Members of the network found out about our investigation and began to act against us. We received threats. Some of our employees went missing. I knew we had to go on, no matter the danger. One day we learned that there was a traitor among us. Someone leaked the information of the Geek Network. It was a big blow to our investigation. We began checking all the employees, trying to find the traitor. After a long search, we discovered that the traitor was one of our detectives named Mark. He admitted that he was involved in the network and helped them avoid justice. We caught him and got a lot of new information about the network. We began expanding our investigation to include federal agencies. It became a national investigation. We discovered more members of the network and began to detain them. It was a long and difficult process. One day we got a big breakthrough in the case. One of the detainees admitted that the network had its own leader who managed all operations. He also gave us his name. It was a former doctor named William. We began the hunt for William. He was very careful and always stayed one step ahead of us, but we didn't give up. We knew that his arrest would be a key point in our investigation. One day we learned that William is hiding in a small town in the state of Montana. We went there and started looking for him. Eventually, we found his stash, an old house on the outskirts of town. We surrounded the house and detained William. He tried to resist, but we stopped him. During the interrogation, he confessed to all the crimes and told about all his operations. His arrest marked the end of a large network of maniacs. After William's arrest, I finally felt at peace. We were able to stop this terrible network and save many lives. The town began to return to normal life. I knew I had done everything I could to stop these horrible crimes. I decided to change my life again. He moved to a new city and started working as a consultant for law enforcement agencies. My experience and knowledge have come in handy for many investigations. One day I received a letter from an old acquaintance. It was Detective George, with whom we worked together on the investigation of the network of maniacs. He invited me to a meeting in his city. I decided to go. George told me about the new investigation. People started disappearing in his town, and everything indicated that it might be the residual activity of a network of maniacs. We decided to join our efforts again and solve this case. We started an investigation by checking all possible leads. It turned out that all the missing people had one thing in common. They were all patients of the local psychiatric hospital. This made us suspicious. We began to check the medical staff of the hospital and found another suspicious doctor named Jack. He had a dark past and changed jobs several times. We decided to follow him. Jack led a very private life. He rarely left the house and hardly communicated with anyone. One evening, we saw him go to an old abandoned factory outside the city. It seemed very suspicious. We followed him and saw him enter an abandoned factory. Inside the factory, we found even more evidence that confirmed his involvement in the disappearances. These were photographs of missing people and various tools. We decided to detain Jack. He tried to resist, but we stopped him. During interrogation, he confessed to all the crimes and said that he was a residual member of a network of maniacs. His arrest was a big step towards ending this terrible story. After Jack's arrest, the town began to return to normal life again. I was relieved to know that we were able to stop the criminal again, but the memories of those events will always remain with me. I continued to work as a consultant for law enforcement agencies. My experience and knowledge helped solve complex cases and stop criminals. I knew I had done everything I could to stop these horrible crimes and protect innocent people. My new life has become much calmer. I made new friends and started new hobbies, but the past always stayed with me. I knew I had done everything I could to stop horrible criminals and protect innocent people. One day I received unexpected news. I got a call from the police saying they had discovered a new group of maniacs who were operating on the same schemes as the network we uncovered. It was a real shock for me. I decided to go back to work and help with the investigation. We again began to look for clues and check all possible options. It was a very difficult investigation, but I knew we had to do everything we could to stop these criminals. The investigation led us to new challenges. We faced many obstacles, but we did not give up. We knew we had to stop these maniacs and protect innocent people. It was a real test for us. During the investigation, we found new clues that led us to another group of maniacs. It was a very difficult and dangerous task, but we could not stop. We knew we had to do everything we could to stop these criminals. We surrounded the hideout of a new group of maniacs and detained them. It was a difficult and dangerous task, but we were able to stop them. Their detention was a big step towards ending this terrible story. After the arrest of a new group of maniacs, the town began to return to normal life again. I was relieved to know that we were able to stop the criminals again. But the memories of those events will always remain with me. I continued to work as a consultant for law enforcement agencies. My experience and knowledge helped solve complex cases and stop criminals. I knew I had done everything I could to stop these horrible crimes and protect innocent people. My new life has become much calmer. I made new friends and started new hobbies, but the past always stayed with me. I knew I had done everything I could to stop horrible criminals and protect innocent people. I finally felt at peace. The past is behind me, and I have started a new life. My experience and knowledge have become useful to many people. I knew I had done everything I could to stop these horrible crimes and protect innocent people. My new life has brought many new opportunities. I made new friends and started new hobbies, but the past always stayed with me. I knew I had done everything I could to stop horrible criminals and protect innocent people. I finally found the long-awaited peace. The town lived its normal life, and so did I. The past is behind me, and I have started a new life. My experience and knowledge have become useful to many people. I knew I had done everything I could to stop these horrible crimes and protect innocent people. My new life has become much calmer. I made new friends and started new hobbies, but the past always stayed with me. I knew I had done everything I could to stop horrible criminals and protect innocent people. The memories of those terrible events will always remain with me, but I knew I did everything I could to stop these horrible crimes and protect innocent people. My new life has become much calmer and happier. I started a new chapter in my life. The past is behind me, and I have found new happiness. My experience and knowledge have become useful to many people. I knew I had done everything I could to stop these horrible crimes and protect innocent people. I made new friends and started new hobbies. My new life has become much calmer and happier. But the past always stayed with me. I knew I had done everything I could to stop horrible criminals and protect innocent people. My new life brought many new challenges. I made new friends and started new hobbies. But the past always stayed with me. I knew I had done everything I could to stop horrible criminals and protect innocent people. I finally felt confident about the future. The past is behind me, and I have started a new life. My experience and knowledge have become useful to many people. I knew I had done everything I could to stop these horrible crimes and protect innocent people. I felt grateful for a new life and for new friends. My new life has become much calmer and happier, but the past always stayed with me. I knew I had done everything I could to stop horrible criminals and protect innocent people. The memories of those terrible events will always remain with me. But I knew I did everything I could to stop these horrible crimes and protect innocent people. My new life has become much calmer and happier. I started a new chapter in my life. The past is behind me, and I have found new happiness. My experience and knowledge have become useful to many people. I knew I had done everything I could to stop these horrible crimes and protect innocent people. My new life has become much calmer and happier. I made new friends and started new hobbies, but the past always stayed with me. I knew I had done everything I could to stop horrible criminals and protect innocent people. I made new friends and started new hobbies. My new life has become much calmer and happier, but the past always stayed with me. I knew I had done everything I could to stop horrible criminals and protect innocent people. My new life has brought many new opportunities. I made new friends and started new hobbies, but the past always stayed with me. I knew I had done everything I could to stop horrible criminals and protect innocent people. I finally felt confident about the future. The past is behind me, and I have started a new life. My experience and knowledge have become useful to many people. I knew I had done everything I could to stop these horrible crimes and protect innocent people. I felt grateful for a new life and for new friends. My new life has become much calmer and happier, but the past always stayed with me. I knew I had done everything I could to stop horrible criminals and protect innocent people. The memories of those terrible events will always remain with me. But I knew I did everything I could to stop these horrible crimes and protect innocent people. My new life has become much calmer and happier. I finally found the long-awaited peace. The town lived its normal life, and so did I. The past is behind me, and I have started a new life. My experience and knowledge have become useful to many people. I knew I had done everything I could to stop these horrible crimes and protect innocent people. It has been several years since my last investigation was completed. I felt at ease in my new life. One day I got a call from an old friend from the FBI, Alex. He told me about a new series of mysterious murders in New York and asked for help. I decided to accept the challenge and went to New York. The crime scene was similar to all the horrors I had seen before. The victims were found in abandoned buildings. Their bodies showed signs of torture. It looked like the work of a new maniac. Alex introduced me to his team. They were experienced agents, but even they faced difficulties in investigating this case. Together, we began to look for clues and analyze all possible evidence. We found a witness who saw a suspicious man near one of the crime scenes. He described him as a tall, dark-haired man with deep scars on his face. This description gave us our first clue. We began searching for all possible surveillance footage in the area where the victims were found. This gave us more information about the suspect. We discovered that he was using an old abandoned house as his hideout. We decided to set up an ambush near an abandoned house. They waited for several days until they finally saw the suspect. It was the same man described by the witness. We detained him and began questioning him. During interrogation, the suspect, named Henry, confessed to all the crimes. He said that he killed people for the purity of society and that he liked torturing his victims. It was a terrifying confession that confirmed all our suspicions. Henry also talked about his methods and motivation. He considered himself a cleaner who rids the world of unnecessary people. His actions were carefully planned, and he always stayed one step ahead of the police. Henry was taken to court where he was charged with all the crimes. The trial was difficult and long, but in the end he was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. After this matter was over, I felt calm again. We were able to stop another maniac and protect innocent people. Once again, my work paid off, and I knew I had done everything I could to ensure justice. After completing the investigation in New York, I returned to my hometown. Life became calm again, but I couldn't get rid of thoughts about new challenges that might appear. One evening, I heard a knock at the door. My old friend Tom, who worked as a private detective, was standing at the door. He came with a request to help in the investigation of a series of disappearances in our city. Tom said that several young women have gone missing in the city over the past few months. The police had no leads and people began to panic. We decided to join forces and investigate this case together. We started the investigation by interviewing the relatives and friends of the missing women. They told us that all the women had last seen each other in the same area of the city. This was the first clue. We learned that all the women were at the same party before they disappeared. We decided to talk to the organizers of this party. They said that there was a strange man at the party whom no one knew. We found photos from the party and were able to identify the strange man. He looked like a man who had been accused of kidnapping a few years ago but had been acquitted due to insufficient evidence. We started following the suspect. He behaved very carefully, but we noticed that he often visits an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. We decided to conduct a capture operation. One evening, we surrounded the warehouse and got inside. We found the missing women who were locked in the basement. The suspect was apprehended without much resistance. It was a big victory for us. During interrogation, the suspect admitted that he kidnapped women for his sick experiments. He kept them in the basement and conducted terrible medical experiments on them. It was a shocking discovery. After this investigation was completed, the city was calm again. The missing women were rescued, and the criminal was sentenced to life imprisonment. Again, I was relieved to know that we were able to stop another maniac and protect innocent people. My life finally settled into a calm rhythm, but the peace did not last long. I received a phone call from an old colleague, Ben, who worked in the Los Angeles Homicide Unit. He asked me to come and help investigate a new series of murders. I came to Los Angeles and met with Ben. He told me that the murders took place in wealthy areas of the city. The victims were found in their homes, and all of them were wealthy businessmen. We started by examining crime scenes. In all cases, there were no signs of a break or a struggle. It appeared that the victims knew the killer or had voluntarily let him into their homes. We carefully analyzed all the evidence and found several traces of DNA that did not belong to the victims. This was the first step towards identifying the killer. We began interviewing neighbors and acquaintances of the victims. One of the witnesses saw a suspicious man who often visited one of the businessmen. The description matched DNA found at the crime scene. We used databases to identify the suspect. He turned out to be Colin, a former bodyguard of one of the victims who was fired for theft. His motives could be related to revenge. We started following Colin. He behaved very cautiously, but one day we saw him enter the house of another wealthy businessman. We decided to act immediately. We broke into the house and arrested Colin at the scene of the crime. He did not resist and was arrested. During interrogation, he confessed to the murders and talked about his hatred of rich people. Colin was sentenced to life imprisonment. His crimes were shocking, but we were glad we were able to stop him before he killed more people. When I got home, I was relieved that another dangerous person was behind bars. But I knew that the world would never be completely safe, and that there would always be a new challenge. I tried to enjoy a peaceful life, but thoughts of future challenges kept me restless. I knew that my experience and skills could be needed many more times. One day, I got a call from an old friend of mine who worked for the Chicago Police Department. She told about a series of mysterious disappearances of young women in the city and asked for help. I came to Chicago and met a friend. She said the women disappeared without a trace and the police had no leads. It seemed like an extremely difficult task. We started by studying the places where the women were last seen. All of them disappeared at night in different areas of the city. This made it difficult to find a single clue. We carefully analyzed all possible evidence. Fabric remnants found at the scene of one of the disappearances led us to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. We went to the factory and found a hiding place where the missing women were kept. Unfortunately, most of them were dead, but a few women were saved. The rescued women told about their abductor, who behaved like a true psychopath. They described his appearance and mannerisms, which helped us draw up his psychological portrait. We began to look for the criminal using the description of the rescued women. It was difficult, but we did not give up. Our search led us to one of the old psychiatric hospitals in the city. We organized an ambush near the psychiatric hospital. The suspect appeared and tried to run away, but we apprehended him. During interrogation, he confessed to all his crimes. The suspect was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His crimes were so heinous that the judge handed down the harshest sentence. After this case was over, I returned home feeling deeply grateful that I had once again managed to stop a dangerous criminal and save innocent people. I decided to devote more time to myself and my loved ones. My experience in law enforcement has given me the opportunity to appreciate every moment of life. I went on vacation to a small town on the coast. The peace and beauty of nature helped me regain my strength and relax after all the trials. I got to know the locals and made new friends. They told me about the old legends and stories of their town. It was very interesting and helped me take my mind off work. One evening, I overheard a conversation about mysterious disappearances in a nearby town. I decided to check these rumors and headed there to find out more. In a nearby town, I found out that several people had disappeared over the past year. The local police could not find any leads and people were in despair. I started my investigation by interviewing the relatives and friends of the missing people. They said that all the missing persons last saw each other in the same bar. This was the first clue. I visited the bar and talked to the owner. He remembered that a strange man often appeared in the bar, who always sat alone and carefully watched the other patrons.